The Aztec Empire, one of the most powerful and feared civilizations in the pre-colonial Americas. They were admired for their massive cities and feared for their human sacrifice and brutal nature. Or were they? Many historians say the truth of the Aztec Empire may be very different. The Aztecs ruled much of what's now Mexico from 1300 to 1521, when the civilizations of most native cultures were met with the arrival of conquistadors from Spain. The world's first awareness of the Aztecs came from their conquerors, and what they shared was shocking. The historical narrative, The True History of the Conquest of New Spain, by Bernal Diaz del Castillo, published in 1568, was the story of 3 expeditions and the eventual fall of the Aztecs and their emperor. The narrative praises the Spanish warriors and portrays the Aztecs as brutal warriors, and it captured the public's imagination. The era saw many brutal conquests, and many of the native cultures were forgotten by those who captured them. But something about the Aztecs stuck in people's minds. Maybe it's that they put up one of the toughest fights against the colonists. Maybe it's that their culture in the city seemed more developed. But most likely it's that the stories that came out of the war with the Aztecs were the most dramatic. An advanced civilization that sacrifices people to a giant serpent god? That's the kind of conquest made for Hollywood. But as time moved on, some people started questioning this. While most of Europe supported the conquest of the Americas, after all, it's free real estate, there were dissenters. Bartolomé de las Casas wrote his own narrative and was shocked by how cool the conquistadors were to the natives. Later, many historians stated openly asking if the Aztecs were truly the brutal civilization they were portrayed as, or if they were an advanced native culture that had been wiped out by the Spaniards, only to be turned into monsters in stories to justify the conquest. The debate raged for hundreds of years, but in 2017 it took a dramatic turn. It was 2017 when archaeologists in Mexico City were digging through the remains of an ancient temple dedicated to the Aztec god of the sun, Huitzilopochtli. It was known as a site for human sacrifice, but no one was prepared for what they would find within. It wasn't just human remains, it was a whole tower of them. The facility was full of racks that contained hundreds of skulls. There had long been legends of towers of skulls that contained the heads of warriors killed in battle, but that wasn't all they found. The tower was full of skulls belonging to women and children. A memorial for those who passed on? Or was it something much, much darker? Many archaeologists consider this the best proof yet of Aztec mass human sacrifice outside the narratives of the conquerors. While it may seem horrible to those watching today, to the Aztecs it may have been a long-standing practice that they believed was essential to keep the world itself intact. If the gods were alive and needed sacrifices to maintain their strength, these individual sacrifices would seem like nothing in exchange for the loss of life it would prevent. To those who believed this, being chosen to be sacrificed to the gods might actually be an honor, and the skulls might be displayed as a sign of honor. Were the Aztecs a civilization of brutal warriors and bloody-handed priests, or something else entirely? Life in the Aztec city of Tenochtitlan, the largest city in the Americas at the time, was surprisingly peaceful, at least most of the time. The Aztecs had a rich culture, including an educational structure that taught both boys and girls, a rarity for the era. They were known for their love of music and poetry, with evidence of both being found in artifacts. Their agricultural systems were more advanced than the average at the time, and the city had a system of law that governed conflicts and condemned violence, including domestic violence. And the Aztecs believed they owed it all to the gods. The Aztec system of religion was, like many early faiths, one of polytheism. They had many gods with rich mythology for them, and the stories around them centered around their feats and often very human connections and rivalries. The sun god, Huitzilopochtli, was their primary god, was represented by a mighty eagle, and also represented war. This made their wars with neighboring civilizations and eventually with the colonists a holy endeavor for the Aztecs. They loved their eternal father, and they wanted to do him proud in battle. But the god of the sun wasn't the only important one. Tezcatlipoca was the god of the night, and was also the god of time, represented by the mighty jaguar. He was a dark power and was feared by his worshippers. But his brother Quetzalcoatl was a different story. While he was a mighty winged serpent resembling a dragon, he was a god of intelligence. He controlled the winds and rain while also serving as the patron god of science, learning, and reading. Countless other deities represented parts of everyday life and had complex rivalries and connections to each other. And the Aztecs believed that together, they kept the world itself on axis, the crops growing and the weather stable for each season. But there was another element to this mythology. The stories of the Aztec gods were ones of war. The gods themselves frequently fought in ages past. There had been 4 previous ones, all long gone, and at the dawn of the 5th era, the gods themselves spilled their blood to bring humans to life. This created a ritual blood debt to keep the gods alive. They had spilled their bloods for the Aztecs, and now the Aztecs would do the same for them, by sacrificing some of their own to give the gods the energy they needed. But why were women and children included? It may seem horrible today that women and children were sacrificed, but in the Aztec moral code it wasn't that simple. For one thing, the Aztecs were actually one of the most gender-equal societies in the world at the time. Not only was domestic violence outlawed and women allowed to get the same education as men, but women had active roles in the family and were allowed to inherit property equally. Women were treated as full citizens of the Aztec Empire, which meant they were just as able to volunteer as sacrifices if they felt the call. As for children, those lines were blurred as well. The Aztecs believed themselves to be children of the gods, given life by their blood. The exchange of blood back was what would keep the sun in the sky and prevent the extinction of all life on Earth. To sacrifice one's own children was seen as the ultimate sacrifice, and for the Aztecs to be returned to the gods was seen as the ultimate honor. Additionally, the definition of children differed across the world. At this time in Europe, child labor was common and education was rare. So many of the younger sacrifice victims may have already been considered adults in the eyes of the Aztecs. But what could bring someone to sacrifice themselves or their children? As advanced as the Aztecs were for the time, they didn't have modern medical science. Ailments that could be cured easily today with minor surgery or medicine could leave someone in agonizing pain until death back then. Archaeologists studied the skulls of many of the boys found at the Tower of Skulls and discovered something shocking. Every single one of the boys had serious dental ailments and damage from infections that could have left them in extreme discomfort. The sacrifice might have been a way to give them peace as well as give them to the gods. Grief and death were a major part of Aztec culture, with widows of men who died in battle spending 80 days in a deep mourning ritual. But not every sacrifice in the Aztec world was of a volunteer. In Aztec lore, the gods engaged in their own wars, and as such, battle was an honored part of life. Tenochtitlan was a fortified city with a rich military culture, and all free men within were trained to be warriors. Much like many empires around the world, the Aztecs conscripted most of their soldiers, and indoctrination into military life was a fact from birth. Literally, it was a common Aztec ritual for a newborn male child to have a tiny weapon placed in their hands on the day they were born. While male warriors were honored, so were women. Giving birth was seen as a battle, and for those mothers who died in childbirth, they were honored in the same way as a fallen warrior. But for the enemies of the Aztec people, things could be distinctly harsher. You don't grow to be an empire by being peaceful and isolationist, and the Aztecs fought many battles against neighboring tribes and kingdoms. They fended off all comers until the colonists came with superior firepower and diseases that the empire wasn't prepared for. But as for all the defeated soldiers of enemy armies, not all were killed. The Aztecs commonly took slaves as spoils of war, as was common for empires. Some of them were used as human sacrifices, but for those who weren't, their situation wasn't as dire as one might expect. Slaves in Aztec society could marry, have children, and even buy their freedom or receive it when their owner died. And no one could be born into slavery, so the children of slaves were free. In some ways, it seems like a dark place, but the Aztecs were battling the darkness. For the Aztecs, life was never a sure thing. Not only did they live in a time where a minor medical issue could result in death, and life expectancy was only a fraction of what it was today, but their religion stated that their continued existence was anything but certain. The gods were at war, and they needed the help of humanity to keep the world going. From that framework, the sacrifices they were asked to make seemed minor. But despite that, Aztec society had signs of brightness everywhere, and it's nowhere more visible than in how they treated their children. The percentage of children sacrificed was small. After all, no society could survive without its next generation. While male children were instructed in combat from an early age, their education went long beyond that. They were taught all vital skills from childhood, including rowing canoes, fishing, and agricultural tasks. Aztec parenting was strict. In those days, disobeying often had life or death consequences, and parents rarely tolerated it. But the Aztecs loved their children, and passing on their skills was how they showed it. Aztec society was a well-oiled machine, and everyone had their part. Why was the role of women so different in Aztec society than in most large societies of the time? It comes back to the factor that defined much of their life: faith. Aztecs saw the world as a perpetual battlefield, and winning the physical battles was no more or less important than fighting the metaphysical ones. Performing rituals that appeased the gods and kept the universe in balance was a critical part of victory, because the warriors believed that gaining the favor of the gods would help them win the day. And who performed those rituals? The women. In this sense, the women were warriors too. While the men were on the battlefield with their weapons, the women would often perform round-the-clock ceremonies. The simple act of sweeping was sacred in Aztec culture. By removing trash and anything that was out of place from the temples, it was believed to keep the cosmos in balance. The religious rituals were seen as a part of winning battles. These could be as simple as sleeping or as visceral as the skulls of the human sacrifices that came to adorn the temples. So, who were the real Aztecs? The brutal warriors of legend? The peaceful, educated empire? Did they love their children or did they sacrifice them? Many of the answers died with the empire, but historians today believe the answer is both. For more on the practice of human sacrifice, check out most brutal human sacrifice techniques throughout history, or watch how an advanced ancient civilization mysteriously vanished for more tales of the past.